A topic that brings so many people to Tantra is shame. Shame is something that we usually don't discover until we start to become sexually active. And then we find that there is this thing that's making us contract and holding us back and affecting our ability to be open and expressive and just be who we are, which is, of course, what sex is really asking from us. So shame is maybe the biggest passion killer, the biggest block to our feeling sexy, and yet it's so deeply, deeply ingrained, especially as it often kicks in or is set in the very early years in our childhood. So it's a very deep thing to unravel. So today I'm going to be talking with an expert on this topic, and her name is Vireo Karvonen, and she's running Sexy Pleasurable Liberation, something like this. She will tell you herself. And she's coming here to share with me today all about shame, what it is, how we know we've got it, and most importantly, what are we going to do about it? So let's welcome Vireo. Vireo, I got a tongue twister there. Before I go on too far, tell me the name of your program.
The name of my program is Sacred Pleasure Liberation.
There we go. Perfect. I just had the sex. I was still attached to the sexy thing. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. I know it's very early in Canada, so I'm very grateful that you're here. Thank you. And
my pleasure.
And so, yeah, as I shared in the introduction, we really want to look at this difficult topic, which is about shame. And so I'm curious what drew you to work with shame. Did you find it in yourself? Was it coming through your clients? What led you to become an expert in healing shame?
Well, it was definitely in myself. I had just come out of a sexless marriage, 17 years. I didn't realize the definition of sexless is if you're having sex 10 or less times a year.
Oh.
So my whole marriage was sexless. And I was really, and sex was not very satisfying. It was, I think, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Paulo Coelho said, there's a book called 11 Minutes. And I think my sex was always like less than 11 minutes, extremely unsatisfying, right? It was penetrative. It really wasn't sex in the true sense of how I know sex now. And so I had this deep desire for something more. Like I knew there was something more. I was reading a lot of teachers and studying a lot of books and taking a lot of courses, but I couldn't find it in my marriage to bring that. And so finally it was my own awakening. And then I felt a lot of shame. I felt a lot of shame that I left the marriage. I felt a lot of shame that I wanted more. I wanted what I was witnessing in others. I wanted what I wanted this sacred union. And I finally realized that I needed to actually find it within myself first, this union of the feminine and the masculine. But I felt a lot of shame as a mother. I was a mother, and in my early 50s, I'm now 59 years young, and I feel and look younger today than I did at 40. But I felt a lot of shame, like, who am I? Who am I to think that I should want more or could want more? And so I think we have, as men and women, this shame that sex and desire is sinful, right? That's come from, even if you don't grow up with religion and the Bible, we're in a Western culture that, sexuality and our bodies and are really connected to sin, that it's sinful, it's bad. We're going to be punished, right, for it.
So when men and women come to work with you, what do you think drives them to suddenly choose Tantra and healing?
Well, one, I think, is that they really wonder, like, is this it, right? Is this what I signed up for? Especially if they're mother and father, parents, he's working hard or she's working, they're feeding the kids, and there's this emptiness. There's this disconnect from pleasure. They're miserable, right? They're not having union and intimacy. They're having this separation. Now it's harder to find time to, maybe they did have, good, what I would call good sex before children. But now suddenly when there's time schedule and children and they've lost each other, they've lost themselves, and yet they know there's this yearning for something more. They love each other. They don't necessarily want to separate, but they know they want something more. And so usually they come because there's a desire first to maybe see if they can find it in the marriage that they're in, rather than having to leave. But there's definitely there's a pain of disconnect. There's a pain of separation. There's a pain of life has sort of become mundane. They've lost the spark. They've lost that aliveness and that vibrant energy. They don't always have a name for it.
Well, ordinariness. I think what you're describing is so familiar to so many people. It's like, we almost put up with it because it's so common, and it's like, like that's almost what we expect. And yet, of course, we can see in the work of Tantra that it's absolutely not the only way, and that it is possible, but we have to put some attention there and do some inner work, right? It's not going to happen by chance, or maybe for the very lucky few who just end up having a juicy love life. But for most people, they have to do some healing and heal that shame. So how do you, what kind of methods are you using? What kind of process do you create for people to heal that shame that's getting in the way?
Yeah, one of the things that has helped me a lot, especially as I started, working with you and Minka and uncovering my own sexuality, and Leola, who's with Kundalini Dance, like I had so much disconnect from my body. I had so much shame. I wasn't, it was so foreign to me. I wasn't even like really in my body. So one of the tools that actually helped me, because I felt quite overwhelmed by even just the energy that was coming through me. It was like I didn't know what to do with it. So one of the tools I have, it's a mindset tool, and I basically walk people through 7 steps. We start with forgiveness, and we move towards more of who we are. But the biggest beginning is that forgiveness, dissolving those beliefs that most of them are unconscious, right? So we need to dissolve those beliefs like undeservingness, not good enough, shame is, shame. We should be ashamed for what we want and how we're feeling. So a lot of shame around our desires. And then moving towards what we'd rather have and how we'd rather be. And it's not really a linear process. It's more of a spiral, right? Like sometimes we move towards this, and then we have another thought that comes up or another belief that comes up, and then we move that one, and then maybe a fear comes up, like, oh my, what if I actually allow myself to feel this energy and this desire? Like maybe I'll be punished, or maybe I'll die, or maybe I'll be abandoned. For me, that was a big one, was the fear of abandonment. If I'm actually allow myself to feel this desire and be more sexual, be more intimate, or move towards what I want, maybe everybody will leave me. Maybe I'll be abandoned. Right. So we get to move through the fears that come up. And that was a big one for me. I had a huge fear that I would be abandoned. And in many ways I was. In many ways, people left me who, they had their own fears around pleasure and orgasm and love. But I needed to come to a place where I no longer abandoned myself.
Oh, yeah.
And I could find that to myself. So I really help people to come home to that place of self-love, of not abandoning themselves, and looking at those dark and light parts, and moving from separation to connection. Connection with the self, connection with source, with spirit. And then when they have that connection with themselves, and they've dissolved that separation, and they've loved that part of themselves that maybe has the judgment, then we can come to connection with another, and we can remember who we are and why we're here.
Wonderful. Which is what we really came here for. So at the Tantric Healing Symposium, we're going to be offering a class online to guide people through this process, right?
Absolutely.
And what can people expect from that? It's going to be interactive.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interactive. They're going to need a bit of paper they're going to be able to speak. And so they'll need a space where they feel free to speak, ideally,
Okay.
if they can say aloud. So I will walk them through the statements. I'll probably have one person who will have an opportunity to have like a demonstration, a live coaching session with me, and then everybody will have their own experience. So they'll need to say the statements out loud, because if we just do it in our heads, it's still sort of in that unconscious realm. So when we bring it we speak it aloud, we bring it to consciousness, and then if there's a contradiction, our mind will let us know, right? So we're bringing that wholeness and that harmony again to the mind, body, and soul. Because what happens is when the body wants to go one way, the soul wants to go another, in the mind, there's this disconnect and stress and resistance. So when we speak it out loud, and there's no spiritual bypassing, so we're really acknowledging what those fears and what the mind is coming up with. The mind it's a gift, right? When we see, oh, okay, that's because I'm afraid of that abandonment. So we can feel it. We're feeling it to free it. So there might be emotions that come up, and then we're speaking out loud. They'll need water, because the brain needs 3 things in order to create these new neural pathways in the brain. So bring water, not coffee, not tea. It actually needs to be water. You could have tea, but just bring water as well. Have water, because the brain needs water to hydrate. You'll need oxygen, so we'll be breathing it in through our nose, out through the mouth, which is more calming to the parasympathetic. And then the third thing is, you don't want to grab carbs and sugar after. You want to make sure you have some protein, whatever your protein go-to is. So that's all they need, and they just need a willingness to play and to practice. And I promise at the end that they will move towards something they'd rather feel. So
yes, which is feeling sexy.
Yeah, sexy, and freedom, liberation, love,
Alive.
sex as natural, alive. Yeah, we'll find
Juicy.
what is kind of a common. We'll pick something common that we can all move towards together collectively.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much, Vireo. Thank you for this beautiful work you're doing, and thank you for sharing it here. And I look forward very much to joining your class.
Thank you. Well,